We do have a ton to get through in this episode.
Common sense is finally prevailing.
There was controversy this month, Dave.
I'm not particularly excited by that.
Secrets and things on set.
I haven't told them anything.
I think this is just good times all round.
Every Doctor Who is liked by somebody, and that's a really good thing.
Davo, my doctor.
I know we disagree on this one.
First world problems, Dave.
I get why fans are asking those questions.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite a lot to talk about.
It doesn't compute.
It's the elephant in the room.
That's okay.
Fandom versus the BBC.
The cardinal sin.
Moving along.
Lunch.
G'day, I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
And this is the Doctor Who show where, for the month of March, we'll be looking, at long last, as promised on the show for so many months, except no substitutes, at Torchwood, Children of Earth. Are you up for it tonight, Dave?
I am. This is something we've been thinking about since late last year. I'm very much looking forward to having this conversation. We haven't touched Torchwood at all, I don't think, in our 10 years doing the podcast. So very, very keen. I do note something must be in the air in Australia because 500 Year Diary, I believe, last week dropped an episode on the Children of Earth. I haven't listened to that yet because I don't want to get their thoughts tangled in with my thoughts. I'll be very curious to see if we have any of the same thoughts. But no, we've been planning this for months and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember the name of the listener who wrote to us even before that, sometime early last year, saying, you guys should do Children of Earth, which is where the thought sort of first came from. I can't think of her name. I believe she was in America. Hello, if you're listening.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, but it was a listener comment. Speaking of other podcasts, I will just do a quick plug, if I may, Rob. I have guested on the new spin-off podcast from Doctor Who, Too Hot for TV, which is Too Hot for TV.
The apple hasn't fallen far from the tree there.
No, which is a friend of the show, Dylan Rees's new podcast looking at spin-offs from things that aren't Doctor Who. And I'm turning up on an episode of that talking about some Star Trek spin-offs, a book and a fan production. So that is either dropping last week or the same day as this. So if you're interested in my thoughts on Star Trek spin-offs, particularly the Next Generation book Imzadi, please do check out Dylan's new podcast.
This is almost a hobby in its own right, you appearing on other podcasts. Would you say that?
Do you know, I actually made a list the other day of the podcasts I've appeared on over the last 13 years, notwithstanding the 3 podcasts where I am an official co-host, and it was a lot more than I expected. And I did start to worry a little bit that maybe there are people out there who listen to some of these podcasts going, not that bloke again.
It's like when the same people pop up on QI and have I got news for you and all that. You're one of them, Dave.
Like I'm just Dave from the Doctor Who show, you know, and I'm not the Dave Hughes of podcast guesting, so, and I don't want to be here. Don't get me wrong, I love appearing on other podcasts, and it's always great to turn on the mic with friends and chat about stuff. But I did realise how many I've done, and it's a little disconcerting.
It's all good fun. Shall we get into some news?
Yes, Rob. Have we had some big news drop before we turned on the microphone this month?
Well, at this point in time, it's old news, but it is news nevertheless. News we even considered doing a standalone episode on earlier this month, but as I said to you, Dave, how's this going to play out? Folks, they found Dalek's Master Plan. Do you like Dalek's Master Plan, Dave? Yes, I like Dalek's Master Plan. Are you excited? I'm excited, yeah. It would have wasted people's time, I think, as a standalone episode, but there are things we can still say, I'm sure, about the find of Dalek's Master Plan. What was your reaction to it being found these couple of episodes?
Yes, so they have found episode 1, The Nightmare Begins, and episode 3, The Devil's Planet. Look, I was sitting here working from home that day, just sitting exactly where I am right now. And I got a message from Rob from 42 to Doomsday, also a regular now on the Gin and TARDIS spin-offs for our own podcast, with this news. And I saw it, and I had the moment of, what speculation is this? Oh, it looks definitive. What crazy out there nonsense website is this from? BBC.com. This is sounding a bit real, guys. And oh my God, they found episodes. What are they? Oh my God, it's the Daleks Master Plan 1 and 3. I didn't believe it for at least, a couple of minutes. And then obviously it is a top 10, if not top 5 story of mine. I was just absolutely blown away. Just could not be happier. Always good to get new episodes of Doctor Who, but when it's from a favourite story, it's just even better. What about you?
Yeah, I'm happy with the find. I won't bury the lead. That said, we'd reached a point recently where it wasn't just a rumour or just big name fans, but even Film is Fabulous were openly saying we know of multiple missing episodes out there. So we knew something was coming. Each month we've been saying, is this the month that it could happen for our news segment? And Dalek's Master Plan was a stronger possibility than some others. So when it was confirmed, for me, it wasn't like, oh my God, they've got The Massacre, which would be my personal grail. Or, oh my God, it's Patrick Troughton's first story, which would be another big one for people. It was more, oh, Dalek's Master Plan, that's cool, that's great. It was that kind of reaction for me. So I'm very happy and I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I wasn't going absolutely crazy in a genuine or even a performative sense for the online crowd. I would reserve that for The Massacre, I think, personally.
Look, that's entirely fair. I think that whilst we knew something was coming, we didn't know it was coming that day, and we didn't know what it was. So there was still a level of excitement. And yes, because it dropped sort of around about lunchtime our time, a lot of the UK and indeed the US were already in bed at that stage. So there was this eerie silence online for a while.
Yes.
And that was part of why I said, do we turn the microphone on? Do we need to fill some of this silence? But you could basically watch UK fans wake up, the afternoon that time, morning their time, and just all sort of react to that news. And by dinner time here, it was everywhere, and there was a lot of noise, which was very exciting. This is episodes 40 and 41. Found in the last 45 years, Rob. So 41 episodes in 45 years since that first official list was sort of circulated of what's missing, which is, it's not a bad effort. And I mean, every time they find one, I think that's going to be the last one. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I think there is still a little more to come, and maybe that ties into our next news story.
It does, which is a continuation on. Now, Film is Fabulous, an organisation we have spoken about a number of times over the last few months, who exist to preserve film collections that have been in private hands and are now being returned to the populace, shall we say. They released a statement that was clarifying a number of points about this find, and it certainly read to me, and I think to a few others, Rob, like, dear Doctor Who fans who've been hassling us, here are the answers to all the questions and conspiracy theories that you have been putting to us in the last 48 hours. But they went through, they made it very clear that they are not out there as treasure hunters. They are there to offer somewhere where private collections that are no longer needed or wanted can have a home. They're sort of like a lost dog society, much more than a dog hunting society, if I can put it that way. So they support donated collections. They don't have the copyright. The BBC has the copyright. The BBC decides what could be announced. In fact, the clips that have been put up on various forms of media have been at the loan of the BBC, because they get to decide what goes out. They did clarify that there are 4 other episodes they did find in the same collection, but they all exist. Now, for reasons of completeness, I'll say they were The Survivors, aka Daleks Episode 2, The Escape, Daleks Episode 3, The Web Planet, which is Web Planet Part 1, and The Executioners, The Chase Part 1. Interesting, Robert, of the 6 episodes in this batch, 5 were Dalek episodes. Is that coincidence, or is that the collector going, oh, Dalek one, I'll have that?
Yeah, well, I believe this collector, they've said a few times, he didn't have an interest in Doctor Who, but I think someone somewhere along the line, when they've been lifting these from the BBC, which is probably how it happened originally, has gone, oh, Dalek story, I'll take that one.
Yeah, I think that's very, very possible. So they were very clear and upfront and said, what we have, we give back to the BBC, and the BBC manages it from there. So please stop hassling us. Please stop putting to us theories that we're hiding something for a particular announcement. And I think that is very fair, because as far as I can tell, Film is Fabulous has been very upfront and down the line and just played a straight bat to everything. So if there are fans out there sort of accusing them of various nefarious things, that is a shame. The final point I want to make on this is that there was obviously a lot of posting on social media, and I was sent a screenshot of a comment that Paul Venezis made. I don't know Paul Venezis, but I think he's involved in missing episodes. He's one of those names that when people want to sound authoritative, they say Paul Venezis said, and everyone goes, oh, well, Paul Venezis, okay. Don't know if that's justified or not, but it's a name. But I'll read you here a question that was asked and his answer, Rob. Somebody said, Paul, If I was going to ask you to grade the chances of more missing episodes appearing within, say, 2 years, what would you say? 10 is high to 1 low. Just curious, thank you. Paul Venezis, 10.
Yeah, there's more to come.
There's more to come, which is just so exciting. But everybody, calm down. Don't look the gift horse in the mouth. Let's look forward to seeing these episodes. I've got a question about that in a moment, Rob. But a statement from Film was fabulous.
Yeah, I think they've known for a while. There are some real nutters out there in Doctor Who fandom. You know, they've made comments similar to this in the past, but this one was particularly pointed. I think it was just trying to set some expectations that on one hand, there is that famous more than a few, less than many comment about missing episodes, and people are expecting more. I mean, they've mentioned collectors plural with missing episodes plural, so they've sort of made a rod for their own backs in some ways with some of the more crazy fans, because they've given them the ammunition. But on the other hand, I think they just want to turn down the heat a little on how soon we'll hear more. Whether that's because some fans are just way too excited and Film is Fabulous is just sick of hearing from them, or whether there are some hurdles that they're encountering and they don't have a clear timeline on when they're going to get this stuff in and when they get it to the BBC and when the BBC cleans it up. And, because clearly the BBC's had this stuff for a while. I mean, even Toby Haydock said, because he got Peter Purvis along to a screening of it, but he told him it was for something different. And he had told him 2 weeks prior to that screening to come along to this thing. So even Toby Haydock knew 2 weeks before the announcement that this was going on. So, they've had these things for a while. And, you've got to build that into these calculations too.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly remember in fandom down in our parts, after the Web of Fear and Enemy of the World episodes were returned, there was this very strong, persistent rumour all through fandom that this was the start of a bigger haul. And indeed, I was at an event where it was announced that Marco Polo had been found.
Yeah.
So I think that the need for some expectations management is important. But the most important question for us, Rob, how are we going to see these in Australia, or indeed the United States, Canada, anywhere that's not England? Sorry, the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, some of our listeners have even asked us that on different internet forums, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And the simple answer is we don't know. The answer I've given is maybe they'll pop up on iTunes as episodes that can be downloaded, bought and downloaded, that is, like previous missing episodes have been in the past. I don't think this is going to lead to the rush release of any sort of DVD or Blu-ray. Some people have speculated that now that Dalek's Master Plan is down to, 7 missing episodes, maybe that's a small enough number to animate, so maybe they'll just animate the rest now, but that will take time. Unless, of course, this has been bubbling away in the background for a while and they're already starting to make plans to do that. Who knows? But in the short term, my best guess is iTunes, followed by, if the BBC was being really kind, putting them on something like YouTube for free.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and one that goes to a point that we have been making now for some time. Go back to 2013 when the last missing episodes were found, and there was a proper worldwide distribution of them via iTunes all at once. We have noted in the past that a number of things, whether it is The War Between the Land and the Sea, whether it is the special cut-down versions, whether it is a number of things, have been UK only. Even Ireland, just across the Irish Sea, or indeed the Northern Irish border, has not got everything in Doctor Who. So
Tales of the TARDIS.
Tales of the TARDIS, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there has been a pattern in this more divided global media market of not getting Doctor Who. And we know that although I think a plurality of our audience are in the UK, a majority of our audience are not.
That's right.
There are a lot of fans listening who I think are asking that question. And if we find out, we will say so. And I hope there is an answer. I really, really do.
Yeah, we've got a lot of Australian fans, a lot of US fans, and of course our fans in Finland and Japan and all these other countries that we love.
The
New
Republic
Zealand,
of Ireland,
of course.
Yes,
yeah.
New Zealand, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Anyway, shall we move on?
We should, but awesome.
Yeah, it's good news. Arthur Darvill has shared his picks for the next Doctor, Dave. While he called Billy Piper showing up in Ncuti Gatwa's Regeneration an extraordinary move, I think he's like most of us and knows there'll be an actual new, real Doctor at some point, and he has floated Lorraine Ashbourne from Sherwood, Nick Mohammed from Ted Lasso, David Threlfall from Shameless, and Mawan Rizwan from Juice. And also, just for you, Dave, Alan Carr, he also threw in. Honestly, I have no thoughts on this list as I've not watched any of these shows mentioned or even recognized the actors from being in anything else. So I'm like, okay, Arthur, you do you. Dave, do you know these shows or any of these people?
The only serious one there that I do know is David Threlfall. I've seen a few episodes of Shameless, but I do remember him from being a very young actor leading in Paradise Postponed. And he was in the movie Conspiracy, which I'm a very big fan of. So I know him. I totally get that one. I know of Alan Carr, and the less said about that, the better.
I had to throw that one in.
Yeah, I know what you were doing there, Rob. And this fish is swimming past that piece of bait.
Okay. And of course, Dave, this makes me think of our long thought about 16 for 16 episode. If Arthur Darvill's out there with his picks for the next Doctor, maybe we should think about doing that episode.
Yeah, I did start a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what inspired me, but I did start to think, well, they're going to be filming the Christmas special at some point soon. Do they cast a Doctor for that? Either to be in it or to be regenerated into at the end of it, or what? So do we need to think about that? So look, I'm kind of ready to do my half of the 16 for 16 when you are, Rob, so you tell me when.
Okay. Take us out of the news, Dave.
Our final piece is that David Tennant is doing 15 more Big Finish episodes. The report here says he will be back in audio form, playing his original incarnation of the Time Lord, so not the second one or the third version, or is there a fourth David Tennant out there? I don't know. Playing the original 10th Doctor in 15 new episodes. David Tennant said in a statement that was completely not drafted for him by some sort of publicist, Big Finish makes it dangerously easy. You turn up, have a lovely time, and suddenly you've saved the universe again.
Wow. I guess not so gentle reminder, Dave, that in Doctor Who, nostalgia is mandatory. That would be my big thought. And if there's a way to bring David Tennant back again, they'll find it. So,
I have been saying for some time that somewhere in the BBC, whenever they talk about Doctor Who, somebody is saying, if not get me David Tennant, get me a young David Tennant. Get me a David Tennant type. He is the Ricardo Montalban of British television at the moment. They want, if you can't have Ricardo Montalban, get a younger version or someone like him. And I think that's where David Tennant is. So, yeah, those who are big fans of David Tennant on Big Finish, 15 more episodes coming out from the summer of 2027.
Good-o. Let's move on to short topics.
And you're leading this one, Rob.
I am, Dave, and I wanted to start with this one to throw up a topic here, not to be all edgelord and too cool for school, but I want to say truly I'm not missing Doctor Who at the moment, especially when we only have this Christmas ep guaranteed in another 8 months, and we don't even know who the lead or the leads are going to be in it. We're just talking about that. So there's little to anticipate there, and there's even less to anticipate beyond that. In terms of, well, actor X is going to be the next new Doctor. I wonder what they're going to be like. We haven't got that. So we're in a sort of semi-wilderness period already, and I find I'm absolutely fine with it. How are you feeling about it, Dave?
I'm okay. I'm not. My life goes on without new Doctor Who in it, partly because there's so much old Doctor Who in it.
Yeah.
I mean, going back decades, I remember there was always a bit of a divide in fandom, and certainly in the local fan club, between those who were of the view that any Doctor Who is better than no Doctor Who, and those in the other camp, which was, you know what, if they're not making a really good Doctor Who, I'd rather they didn't make it. They're both very valid approaches. I think you certainly fit into that latter camp, and I certainly, I think, fit into the latter camp more than the other camp. I would love Doctor Who to come back. I'd love it to be Doctor Who. I like tuning in to see new Doctor Who, but if they don't have a reason to do it and they don't know what they're doing and they're sort of making it out of muscle memory or habit or obligation, go away and work out why you're doing it, what you want to say and how you want to do it, and make it good.
Yeah, I find I just have so many other interests in life that, new content being dialed back is no biggie to me. It changes nothing in my day-to-day life, and there's tons and tons and tons of existing Doctor Who if I need a fix, more than I'll ever consume if we include all the novels and the audio especially. And there's 10,000 conversations you and I haven't had, so when I look back and think about the last couple of series and my PTSD kicks in about that giant skeleton Omega and the Doctor who couldn't have the traditional sonic screwdriver because it looked like a gun, but then he was using the Vindicator like a gun in the final episode. I think, oh Christ, what a dumpster fire Doctor Who turned into. Unsurprisingly, I'm not missing the new episodes, and I just thought I'd throw it out there as a little starter discussion. Yeah.
Look, every Doctor Who Show monthly episode, we have a very full what have we been watching at the end, which is good new television. And every short topic range, there's usually at least one or both of us has read a book, watched a show, done something with Doctor Who. So yeah, look, it's not as though it's a wasteland out there.
Not at all. What have you got?
My first short topic is that I got to see Louise Jamieson at the recent Sirens of Audio event that we plugged in our last monthly meeting. I went along with a whole bunch of Doctor Who fans, again, a very good turnout here in Melbourne, and saw Louise Jamieson. I have seen her once before, but that was at one of those big industrial convention events where, you know, guest comes on at 10 minutes past the hour, a few inane questions are thrown at them, they come off 10 minutes to the hour, and you go, well, that was a nice passing moment.
How long ago was that?
Oh, this would be 10 years, I reckon.
Yeah, I was going to say, that must be a while, yeah.
Yeah, it was a while, and I didn't get an autograph on that occasion because it's hard to get them at these industrial things if you don't plan ahead and take out a second mortgage.
Yeah.
So it was very good to get to the Sirens of Audio event and have a chance to see her talk at length with fans, organise an autograph, all that sort of thing. It was really, really interesting because I was thinking about it as I was watching Louise Jamieson. Has she had necessarily the biggest career of any classic Who companion? No, I think there are others, your William Russells, your Fraser Hineses, your Bonnie Langfords, but you know, Louise must be up there on that list of just really impressive careers. So seeing somebody like that who is still working, still very, very active on British television, has been in big household soaps, big household dramas, has been involved in the production of television specifically designed by and written by women, back when that was a very rare thing, and talking with quite a bit of passion about being involved in early shows that were written by women for women and that sort of thing, talking about her favourite role in Tenko, which is a series that I must admit I haven't ever actually seen, and that's a huge omission by me. I must go track down Tenko sometime this year and watch that.
I saw that when I was young, very young. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, as we've said before, Rob, as these actors and actresses move further and further away from Doctor Who and on in their life, they get more and more honest about their time on the show. I saw Louise 10 years ago talk about Tom Baker and tell some stories. Seeing her talk about Tom Baker this time was very honest, very, very frank. Talked about the difficulties in the past, talked about the moments they had to get through, and talked about the reconciliation in the latter part of her time on Doctor Who and further reconciliation with Tom. She talked about the people she worked with. She talked about being written out. It was just a really informative presentation by someone who has had a really big career and happy not just to talk about Doctor Who, but talk about Doctor Who in the context of that great career.
Yeah, it's good to see. I love that, yeah.
And they haven't announced who they're getting next, but I believe Sirens of Audio will be doing more events. So look, we're fans of them. Please go along.
Yeah, in terms of people from the show, at least, I think they're going to do something with Jason Haig-Ellery. I think I've seen something about that.
Oh, okay.
Just talking like big Finnish type stuff. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But as for ex-companion type people, no, I haven't seen that.
I'm sure there's more coming.
Indeed. Moving on to my second, I was thinking about fan films this month, Dave, for reasons which will become apparent when we do What Have We Been Watching. And no, I haven't actually been watching fan films, but park that. I was specifically thinking of the Star Trek and Star Wars experience with them, because both franchises historically played pretty nice with fans making fan films for a long time. And surprisingly, after moving to Disney, Star Wars still does. There's just this understanding, it's a vibe. You know, don't monetize it, guys. Don't pretend it's official. Don't step on our toes. And as long as you stay respectful, Disney tends to leave you alone. But Trek, and I was learning all of this recently in some YouTube videos. One of them was like a little documentary about this topic. Because of one massive project about a decade ago or so, which they crowdfunded, Trek fan films have now got limits on their runtime, restrictions on the crowdfunding for them, rules about using actors from the franchise. Basically, you can't use actors from the franchise. Whereas once upon a time, all of this was fair game. And I thought, gee, they seem really thin-skinned over at Paramount. Like, no one's going to mistake a fan film for the real deal, even if you throw $1 million at it and have some known actors in it. It's always going to look slightly off, slightly amateur. It's often because you have people acting who aren't really actors and all that sort of stuff. It's not competition, yet Paramount's put all these big rules in place. Do you have any thoughts about fan films, Dave? Have you watched any of these Trek fan films?
I have watched one and discussed it at length on Too Hot for TV with Dylan Reeves, coming out today.
This is not a setup.
This is not a setup. I actually will speak at length on that podcast about exactly what you're talking about and how they shut down a number of fan films and indeed the Australian experience with the watching of episodes at fan clubs in the 90s being shut down by Paramount when they suddenly realised what was going on.
That's nuts. Again, this is not a setup. People, for Dave's answer, tune into Too Hot for TV.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, because to answer your other question, Rob, I have seen a number of Trek fan films, some made with near releasable production values, and that have won Saturn Awards, and some that are embarrassing. I would say better than fan made Doctor Who films, and by that I don't mean proper professionally made like BBV and Real Time and that. I'm talking genuine made films which are usually dreadful for Doctor Who. I haven't seen any Star Wars stuff.
Okay. I saw a Star Wars one recently, and clearly they loved the battle at the end of Rogue One, the Battle of Scarif. And basically they'd made their fan film The Battle of Scarif, but they're pretending it was on a different planet. And I thought, you've done so well here to get the costumes and a nice location here on the beach, and the effects were very good, but it was so derivative. It was like they had such skill in some areas, but in the creative area, in the area of making up their own story, they were just so obsessed with recreating the Battle of Scarif. That's all it looked like to me, and that was very disappointing.
The thing that worries me about Star Wars is that everybody wants to do a lightsaber duel, and if you don't really know how to choreograph and do a lightsaber duel, they look terrible.
Yeah, you end up looking like that little fat kid swinging his lightsaber around, falling over, or whatever he did back in the 90s.
Yeah, there is so much footage of just really bad fan lightsaber fights.
Yeah, there sure is. Anyway, to round us out of short topics, Dave, what have you got for us?
As I said, Rob, that usually a short topics doesn't go by without us having read something or watched something, and this month I have read something, and that is the new adventure Sanctuary from April 1995 by an author that I certainly enjoy, and we've talked about a couple of times, David A. McGinty. When I mentioned on social media that I was rereading Sanctuary for the first time in what must be 30 years, there were a number of people who reached out and said, that's one of their favourites, or that's their favourite McGinty book. And so I was really curious to go back and read it, particularly because it is famously the first pure historical Doctor Who did following Black Orchid. So it is very, very rare for Doctor Who in any way, shape or form. I thought it was very, very good. It isn't going to be at the top of my David A. McGinty books. I still have stuff like First Frontier and Face of the Enemy above it. But it was very, very good. And as we know when we discussed The Shadow of Wen Chiang on this podcast, Rob, McGinty does a lot of research and he really makes history come alive.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This is set in medieval France, which is a part of the world I'm not particularly familiar with. And the characters were so real, the details so genuine. I was looking up, like, is this township a real place? Is this guy that's trying to run use the Spanish Inquisition, which no one was expecting, to become Pope? Was he a real contender to be Pope? Did he become Pope? And it turns out, it's all fictional but based on reality. And so, it was that well drawn. So that was really good. McGinty uses the New Adventures, too broad, too deep, more adult concept to do the medieval time justice. So rather than on TV on Doctor Who where somebody's hit by a crossbow and they go, and fall down bloodless, or, you have a sword fight and somebody sort of brushed over the shoulder with the edge of a sword and they fall down dead. You can have crossbows and how it feels and what, the guy, drowning in his own blood, and you can have swords coming through the face of somebody, and you can have somebody being stabbed and their gut spilling out, genuine medieval sort of horror. That you can't do on the show, so they use that really, really well. This is, of course, the book that is famous for the romance between Benny Summerfield and Guy DeCarnick. I was surprised at just how subtly that was portrayed, given this was a Virgin New adventure, which are not known for their sexual subtlety. So that was very, very nicely done. So look, it was a very good book. I'm glad I've reread it. Fascinating as a historical. Not going into my top tier instantly, like some fans, but close to.
Oh, very nice. And rest in peace, David A. McEntee, a great author. Great author.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually got for Christmas his Star Trek Next Generation book, which I read, and that was really fun to read as well.
Oh, nice one. All right, folks, moving along to our main topic. We're finally doing it. We're going to talk Torchwood, Children of Earth, or Torchwood Season 3, if you want to look at it that way. Dave, we often start these chats with our first experiences. What was your first experience with Children of Earth?
So Torchwood was very hard to come by in Australia. That's, I think, a very important point to make. And in fact, I was watching the chaps over at Bergenbeard do their review of Season 1 of Torchwood, which dropped just last week at time of recording. And they reminded us how the ABC and SBS both passed on Torchwood here in Australia, which is very, very unusual for them to pass on a BBC show. And it was bumped off to one of the commercial stations here, and after
Channel 10.
Yeah, Channel 10, and after about 4 episodes relegated to sort of midnight on Channel 10. But by the time we got to Season 3, it was on pay television on Foxtel on UK TV, which was very rare. Like lots of people did not have Foxtel boxes, and if they did, they didn't necessarily get UK TV. I certainly didn't have it living in the officers' quarters at the RAF base I was living at and working at the time. So I didn't see it go out. At some point, as with a lot of Doctor Who around about Season 3 and Torchwood, I acquired copies that my dad had found somewhere on the internet. And I remember that summer it would have been, so probably about 6 months after it was broadcast in the UK and here in July of 2009, I reckon probably January, February of 2010, thinking I really should get around to watching this new season of Torchwood. Because I'd watched Season 1, it was okay. I'd started Season 2, and just because I didn't have easy access, I kind of dropped off. But people were raving about this, so I thought I'll get down and watch it. So I put in my downloaded, burnt onto CD MP4 copies of Children of Earth and watched it on my laptop. And I thought, I'll watch episode 1 and see how it goes. Because, it's hot and I don't want to do anything. And 5 hours later, I had watched all of it. And I remember that very, very vividly. And I said at the time, and I've said it since, my memory of it is that it was the best thing that RTD's production company did in that first block of RTD stuff, in those first 4 or 5 or 6 years of Doctor Who. And I haven't seen it since until now.
Yeah, look, I have a similar background with it. I started thinking about this era and I thought, oh yeah, there was the Channel 10 thing, but by the time of Season 3, by the time of this, it was somewhere else. And yeah, you're right, it was Foxtel, which I didn't have. I got this as a DVD from the UK, which is still the DVD I own and which I watched for this episode. So whenever it dropped on DVD in the UK, I bought a copy and watched it, and that's how I watched it out here. I would have always bought the DVD anyway, even if I had seen it on local TV, because I am a collector, but I bought it specifically to watch. Other than that, this whole era around 2009 is just really hazy for me. I think I was just gallivanting around the country, going to pop culture conventions with the 501st Legion and drinking lots of beers and dressing up as an Imperial officer and things like this. So I don't have great memories of it, but I do remember I got the DVD, I watched it that way, and I thought it was great too. And yes, this is also my first rewatch since that time.
Wow. So it would have been probably 2010-ish for you as well?
Well, I mean, in the UK now, the DVDs and Blu-rays drop not long after a show ends. Like the season ends and it's almost on Blu-ray or DVD straight away. I don't think that was quite the experience back in the day, so there may have been a little lag. But I would like to think it dropped on DVD in the UK in 2009 still, and I would have got it in 2009.
Were you a Torchwood fan going into this, or were you a Torchwood skeptic? You were? Good.
I was. I thought the first season was ropey. There was only one story I really liked, and I can't think of its name. I think it's like Out of Time or something, where some people from the 1950s fly in a plane and realise they're in the modern era, and one of them can't deal with it and kills himself and all of that stuff. All spoilers. That was a really good one. Then the second season, I think, was trying to be a lot campier and funnier and just leaning into it and having fun and not trying to be as edgelord. And I really liked that second season. You got the James Masters character coming in. He was Captain somebody else. And I thought that was just really fun. So by the time of the third season, I thought, yeah, this is really great. But then this was a completely different thing to Torchwood season 1 and season 2. But maybe we'll get into that discussion. Should we bring the spoiler curtain down, perhaps?
We should bring the spoiler curtain down.
Okay. Dave, what were your thoughts going into this?
I was nervous going into this because I remembered it being really, really good, and I didn't want it to not be good. I didn't want it to have aged badly.
Yep.
And I was also amazed at how little I really remembered. There were key plot points and that I certainly did remember, but as it unfolded, I realised just how much detail I'd forgotten and how many little subplots I had forgotten and how much there was into it. So I went in apprehensive but hopeful.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to it. I mean, our listeners will know we've been entertaining the idea for a long time. I won't labour over that point again. So we'd both been looking forward to it. And I hadn't rewatched it over the years, but I thought I'd remembered enough. I certainly knew it wasn't going to be like season 1 of Torchwood. It wasn't doing adult in that adult, oh, let's shag, we're so adult sort of way. But instead, it was going to be doing more moral dilemmas, horrible situations, main cast dying. I mean, you can't forget that. Particularly with Yanto's shrine being pulled down recently in the news over in the UK. But at the same time, yeah, I hadn't remembered every last detail or any of the big lines or whatever. So there were things in it that I felt I was almost seeing fresh, which was quite exciting. But I wasn't to know that going in. I thought I knew a lot, but some of it I didn't.
Yes, likewise.
All right, your headline thoughts then.
I was not disappointed. This does stand out as being very, very good television. I have a number of comments to make on it, some good, some bad, some simply observational, but I think it does stand up as very, very good television. I think that its biggest issues are ones around its age, coming up to nearly 20 years old. And that's not its fault, but I think that they are things that we will definitely talk about. I do think it feels very odd in the world in which it lives, and that's probably the first big thing I'll talk about in our main discussion. But more than anything, particularly once we got past episode 1, we got into episodes 2, 3, 4 especially, I genuinely felt tension. I was genuinely sitting there going, oh, I don't remember this, or I kind of remember how this turns out, but I completely forgotten how they got there. I've forgotten that bit, and I'm actually getting a bit nervous about what's going to happen and why it's all happening. And I felt that tension really build up, so it was a very, very effective watch.
Nice. My headline thought is, compared to the RTD2 era we've recently lived through, not only was this a palate cleanser in a general sense, but it was really sobering to me that RTD can actually write. He wrote 2.5 of the episodes here, so 2.5 of the 5 episodes. And it really is compelling. You're quite right. And this is the kind of thing I perceive that the war between the land and the sea wanted to be, but ended up just being some bizarre fart in the wind that no one's even talking about anymore. Whereas here we are, almost 20 years on, still going, oh yeah, I remember this and I remember that, and oh, wasn't it amazing? Yeah, I don't think War Between the Land and the Sea is holding up anything like this. So that was one of my thoughts as I went in. So Dave, let's get into our general discussion. I want to lead off by talking about the other writer, now that I've mentioned RTD. This was co-written, or 2.5 of the episodes were co-written, with a guy called John Fay. And I reckon 99% of listeners will be saying, who? And I had to look him up myself. He was the head writer on Coronation Street for about 100 episodes. And he's had some smallish but interesting credits in television. I think he might be spread around a bit more liberally in theatre, which explains the TV resume not being so complete. But he absolutely wasn't a Doctor Who alum or a sci-fi guy or part of the Doctor Who gang. He didn't go and drink with them at the pub. And maybe that helped here with writing a scary, gritty, political, moral sort of drama, rather than someone being a Doctor Who fan and thinking, oh, what's going to appeal to the Doctor Who fans? John Fay, not in that area.
No, I think that is right. It definitely feels like a piece of television first and part of the expanded Doctor Who universe second.
Yes.
Which brings me nicely to the point that I wanted to start off with, Rob, which I flagged a moment ago, which is the world in which this exists, because it's very interesting to look at what they're doing here, because they're clearly going for something that is very grounded in the real UK of 2009. Almost too much so, because I was reflecting as I watched it. It's going for that, what we'd say is the traditional Pertwee era vibe, you know, the whole Yeti on the gents in some suburb in London I've never been to. And they're going for that, but they're going much, much harder than the Pertwee era, because let's face it, the Pertwee era, there was autons on a random nameless street. There was a few seconds of Marylebone Station in the Silurians, but there's not much more than that, really. It's just set in Earth insofar as they filmed it in England.
Yeah.
Whereas this is going, you know, we're seeing families, we're seeing school kids, we're seeing schools, we're seeing the streets of London, we're seeing TV reports. There's a real grounding of this is very suburban UK 2009. Which is very good in terms of making this feel like a real and genuine threat. But it almost goes too far, I think, in being the real world. Because when you start to drop John Barrowman as Captain Jack into that world, when you start to drop the Torchwood Hub into that world, when you start to drop aliens into that world, it works, yes, in being grounded and therefore scarier. But there also, I found, was a few moments of, this doesn't fit. This you've gone so real, and now you've put so fantasy into there, and I'm almost feeling a tension, you know, a sort of a rubbing together of these two things, because you've made it almost too real.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When you talk about suburbia, like back in Wales, all those shots in the, I don't know if it's a council estate or just sort of a low rent suburb, that feels extremely real with everything that goes on there.
Yeah, which is great. So when you have the government authorities trying to round up children, that feels horribly real and really, really lands. It's really effective. When you start to have sci-fi concepts running around those streets, you go, hang on, this almost feels cartoonish now, because it's contrasted with such a gritty reality.
Yeah, agree there. I wanted to mention Yanto and Jack's relationship because it's signalled almost straight away in the story. And I always knew that was a thing. Obviously, I've seen this before. But I'd forgotten the razzing he gets from his sister, which is all, oh, have you gone bender? And then her husband says something a lot cruder to him, yet in a still loving sort of way.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this is actually realistic dialogue. But I doubt you'd hear it done in a story today. People would be stepping on eggshells around saying this sort of stuff. And I found it interesting that they also go so hard on stressing that while Yanto is way into Jack, I don't think he sees himself as gay. He says it's all about Jack, and it's only Jack. If there was no Jack, he wouldn't be with a bloke, that sort of thing. And that, of course, ties back into him being massively into the Cyberwoman in season 1 of Torchwood and all of that. Long story short, what I'm getting at is they're not trying to say he's had a complete backflip and turned gay, or he's opened up a bit and now he's a bit fluid and he's bisexual. They're just kind of explicit that if Jack wasn't around, Yanto wouldn't be with a bloke. And I'm thinking the direction I think RTD or most TV writers would have gone in 2026 is that I think they would have taken he's now fluid and just didn't know it before path. I thought it was very interesting how they couched the relationship here. It's a real relationship, but they don't try and push it in any direction. It's just because of Jack.
Yeah, I found it very interesting to watch as well, and I had some mixed thoughts. You're right, the very real, loving but crude dialogue with the family is, I think, well written and interesting to see. I think it's absolutely worthwhile making the point that we are still at a point in 2009 and going back to 2007 when Torchwood first dropped, where having two male leads in a relationship would still have been unusual on British television. So it is definitely a positive step, but it reminded me of the point I've regularly made about the first RTD era, which is that it really didn't have any properly out gay characters. Captain Jack is into blokes, but he's into everything. Ianto is in a relationship with another man, but he's not, defining himself as gay. It's just I've kind of fallen for Jack, and that again feels very 2009, and it's interesting because they could have gone down the path of saying, hey, Ianto, you had a girlfriend and you've had girlfriends and all the rest of him saying, look, I think deep down from my childhood, I knew that I was gay, but I was too scared to act on it. I had relationships with women because that's what I thought you meant to do, but Jack's the one who's shown me who I really am. It's time to come out to my family and tell that story. Or they could have done, Kit Connor and Heartstopper and gone, hey, bisexuality exists, guys.
Yeah.
They could have done that, but they didn't sort of go for any of those moments that I think you would have maybe in 5 years' time done. It's still just like, look, they're in a relationship, but they're not gay. Just no. So yeah, I found it a really interesting, almost tipping point in depiction where it's like, yes, we're going to show it, but we're not going to lean too hard into it.
Yeah, you can almost see it as a stepping stone to where we're at today, perhaps.
Well, I think we're several stones further now. But yeah, look, it definitely feels 20 years old. Put it that way.
Yeah.
My next point, Rob, is I still don't know. Having watched this a second time, having seen interviews with RTD and read stuff about it, I don't know if RTD genuinely meant Torchwood to be terrible at their jobs, or that's just how it worked out. Because I remember watching the first season of Torchwood and saying to friends, why are these guys a thing? They're terrible at their jobs. They're unprofessional. They're lazy. They spend their time shagging and eating pizza and kind of doing a terrible job. And if it wasn't for the fact that Jack has a 30th century knowledge and they have access to cool alien tech, they would be absolutely terrible at their jobs. And is that what RTD's trying to say, or is that just my perception? Because that's RTD's idea of, being pop and loosey-goosey. And you again get to season 3 that we're watching now, and the guys in Torchwood spend 4 episodes going, we've got to be part of this. We're the experts on aliens, and we should be involved in these negotiations, and let's get us involved, and we're the ones who are going to sort it out. And then after 4 episodes, they finally get involved. They mess it up disastrously, get themselves killed, get an entire office block of people killed, and upset the aliens and put things backwards. And I thought either RTD has been phenomenally deliberately clever, and he has set up this idea that actually these Torchwood guys are a bunch of crazy people who aren't very good at their jobs after all, and this is the payoff, or that's just the reading I've got, and this is just his way of ending the lives of his kooky characters. I don't know which it is, Rob.
Yeah, they get most of MI5 killed. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? I think we're meant to take this seriously, like, oh, it was just bad luck. Oh, gosh, the stakes are high, it was bad luck. But yes, your reading is still quite right. They do look quite hopeless at what they do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Dave, Peter Capaldi comes on screen, and I'm like, okay, I know this is Capaldi. I see him right there. He's on the screen. But he doesn't feel like the Doctor at all. And even though he's in a suit and he's doing government type stuff, I don't think he's anything like Malcolm Tucker. And I thought to myself, this is acting, isn't it? He's not hiding under prosthetics or a wig or wearing weird clothes, or he's not doing a voice. He's just being Peter Capaldi. But he is inhabiting a totally different character here. I found that extraordinary. I actually kept willing myself to try and see the Doctor in him, and the Doctor wasn't there.
Peter Capaldi is one of the genuinely best actors to have played the role of the Doctor. And this absolutely defined that for me as well. Like you said, his performance is completely different to any of the other characters he's known for, but full of wonderful, subtle, genuine moments of acting where you, as you said, he inhabited the character. You felt nervous when he was nervous. You felt proud when he was proud. You felt terrified and sad. You absolutely rolled that roller coaster with him, and he's part of a really, really impressive cast. Was this? There were so many people in this that I've gone, I know you from this thing. Oh, I know you from Hornblower, and then Nicholas Farrell turns up, who goes all the way back to Chariots of Fire. He was in the second season of House of Cards to play the King, where incidentally he played what I think was the first openly gay couple I ever saw in a television show in that show. But of course that's done sort of 15, 20 years before this was. And in that one, it's a scandal that requires him to resign from his job. So that's, a stepping stone back from where Torchwood was, which is just an interesting little side character. But how genuinely good is this cast?
Yeah, it's very good.
Very, very good. I was very interested, Rob, watching this and the way that it was paced. It did do the sort of the day 1, day 2 through to day 5 thing, which I thought was very effective. And it did string the plot out very neatly across 5 episodes, because there was no point across the 5 hours. And I'll say I did watch this sort of over the course of about 7 nights. I didn't binge it in one go. I wanted to savour each episode. But there was no episode where I was sitting there going, I'm bored by this. There were definitely moments, episodes where I thought, okay, this is the subplot you need because Jack can't arrive at Thames House yet. Or this is the subplot you need to show us how bad these things are. And yes, you could quite happily, I think, truncate this down to maybe 3.5 hours rather than 5 and lose none of the plot. But I don't care, because all the, in inverted commas, filler that they had there was extremely entertaining filler. And look, could you have kind of cut the whole subplot of the government wants to kill Jack out of the whole thing and miss nothing? Absolutely you could. That actually has no bearing on the plot whatsoever, other than to show that the government are a bunch of pricks and hypocrites. But the interest of the guy who's infiltrating Torchwood and turns out to be a traitor and shoots Jack, and then Jack's blown up because he's got a bomb inside him, and then he comes back to life in that horrific way, etc., 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 was all great. So, is it filler? Sure, but it was entertaining filler.
Yeah, we do lean a lot on Jack being immortal in this. He's shot to death, at least 3 times, and the bomb in the belly as well. They're really wanting to hammer home. He's immortal, guys. He's immortal. You know, have you got that? He's immortal. Yeah. Look, we're praising this so much. There were some bits in this where I was a bit like, oh, come on. Or I rolled my eyes. I've got 3, so bear with me on these 3, Dave. The first was where Lois, who seems to be such a newbie in so many ways, sees a unit uniform, and she's like, that's not a British Army uniform. And I get it. They want some exposition to explain what unit is. But it seems so bizarre that a uniform that's really quite close to a British uniform catches this young woman's eye, And she's like, that's not a British Army uniform. That made me laugh. The second is Gwen's fighting when the hub gets blown up and she dives out of a door firing a pistol in each hand like an action hero. And I'm like, no. That is really silly looking in a show where, as we've been discussing, we're looking for a certain kind of realism. We've just shoehorned in something that looks really bloody silly.
Yes.
And truth be told, I thought she did that in the 4th season of Torchwood. And maybe she does do it there too. But I'd completely forgotten about her doing it here. And it was really jarring to me because I thought, oh, yeah, Children of Earth is the serious, grounded, measured one. And yet she was doing that, pew, 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 flying through the air. It's like, oh, come on. And finally, Dave, Decker, the MI5 boffin, being really annoying in the last episode, and Johnson, the woman in charge of that kill team, just shoots him in the leg, just like turns around and shoots him. And I get that it's meant to be funny, the creepy MI5 guy's annoying, so she does what the audience probably wants to do to him, but in that moment, it's just, no, you wouldn't do that. I mean, think of all the arteries in his leg, and think of how important this guy's tech skills are to what they're doing, and she just shoots him for a gag? Like, no, we don't need a gag there. Again, that sort of just broke the realism of the episode for me as well.
Yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing I was talking about with this occasional tension between we're being super realistic and actually now we're being a goofy sci-fi show for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. I also had a number of nitpicks that I sort of came across, and often they're, that RTD infamous lack of attention to detail sometimes, like the website that says that Torchwood was founded by HRH Queen Victoria rather than HM Queen Victoria. That really annoyed me. And, the websites looked primitive even for 2009. That was quite funny, and everybody's got 6 character passwords that they put up on post-it notes. Now, look, yes, it's meant to be a plot device that they're a bit careless about that sort of thing, but in 2009 I was in the Air Force with access to the Defence Restricted Network and the Defence Secret Network, and I can tell you even then our passwords weren't 6 characters that you put up on a post-it note. They were a bit more complicated than that, and you changed them regularly. So it did sort of have that occasional sense of like, come on, guys, like you clearly have no idea what a website really looks like, do you?
Yeah.
Let's talk about what I remembered as being one of the most powerful scenes in the series, and it still stood out as being one of the most powerful ones, and that is the meeting of the what do you want to call it, the security cabinet, whatever that committee is, where they decide that they have no choice but to give in to the 456's demands, and therefore they have to give them a certain number of children in the hundreds of thousands. And how do you do that? And that was so realistic and so chilling and so real that it actually just completely gripped me and engaged me. It reminded me of one of my favourite movies, Conspiracy, which is the dramatisation of the Wannsee Conference, where the Nazis sat around and just worked out the logistics and the mechanics of the final solution. And it's, an hour and a half of a bunch of Nazis sitting around a conference table, and it's just utterly gripping. This was 15, 20 minutes of half a dozen actors sitting around a conference table and was equally gripping. And I certainly thought, although I'll expand on this at another point later, it felt very real because it felt like the conversations those people would have. You could call it hypocrisy, you can call it humanity, and it's probably a combination of both of them of, can we do this if we know that our kids aren't exempt? Can I have my nieces and nephews exempt? No, that's going too far. What choice do we make? And discussion about, do we do it by random ballot because that's fair? No, we don't. And that got me thinking about other times when they've come close to doing this in history, whether it's the Vietnam era draft here in Australia, the call up in the UK in World War II, various forms of conscription and drafting in the United States, which were all on face value random selection, but all of them had some form of exemption for certain careers or professions, people studying certain courses or being students, or people who could effectively buy their way out of it. So I thought, yeah, even those random ballots, so-called, still effectively skewed very, very much away from the middle-class governing elite to the working class, and that's a very common thing. So I don't know if RTD was deliberately trying to make that point, and he certainly didn't labour that point if he was, but got me thinking about that, which I think is really effective storytelling.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. At some point, people have had to make rules. Where does this start? Where does it end? Who's exempt? All of that sort of stuff. It even makes me think of Platoon, where the Charlie Sheen character is talking about why he's joined the infantry. And he thought it shouldn't have just been the poor kids being sent to war, because he's sort of like a middle-class kid in Platoon. And he's like, I didn't think it'd just be the poor kids, because it often is, sadly, in
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
situations.
Yeah.
We've mentioned the 456 now, so let me ask a question. Why don't the 456 just take the kids? I mean, we do have these amazing places, Dave, where children gather in their hundreds, if not their thousands, called schools. If the 456 just appeared over some schools, whoosh, they could take what they want. It seems very convoluted to build the chamber and communicate with Earth and ask for a gift and all of that. They clearly have technology more advanced than us. You know, they just appear as light out of nowhere. They can zap kids away. We've seen that back in the 1965 example. So why don't they just do that? I realise we lose half the story or more of it if they do, but it's worth mentioning because when I had that thought, it almost cruelled a bit of the story for me. I was thinking, well, why do they have to do it this way?
It's interesting that the first time they come to take the kids, 40 years ago or whatever it was, they do it in exchange for I almost lost the dialogue as I was watching, but it was a cure for something that they were after, and there was an exchange
like
of
some Hong Kong flu or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so humanity got the cure, and in return they got the 30 kids. I don't know whether something was meant to be in there and lost of. Well, no, we'll give you something again this time. I think they were definitely going for that sense that these aren't sort of monster of the weeks that are just rocking up to do evil things for evil reasons. They're traders. They're tobacconists. They're drug smugglers. They're whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it. They're not here to just sort of rape and pillage and blow things up because they're the baddie. They're there because they want to take our kids and then sell them on the space black market as a commodity. And I think that they need to have that exchange to make that point. But you're right, it doesn't quite work when you think about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's not explained. Like it's said very early in the piece, the children will get to live forever. And when we see one of the kids hooked up to one of the 456, he's still wearing his 1960s knitted vest. You know, he looks kind of old and haggard, but he's still wearing the knitted vest from the 60s. So they do sort of live forever, which the 456 thinks is a nice thing that they may be doing for the kids. I don't know.
Yeah, the 456 has certainly stopped the aging process, but I think obviously living in that atmosphere just cruels the skin and the flesh.
Yeah, I will say hiding the 456 in that steam or gas or whatever we want to call it does make it look very effective. Because when we see the behind the scenes, it's not a bad looking alien by any means, the puppet they've got, because it was a puppet. But by hiding it, it becomes 5 times scarier, Dave. I love that.
Yeah, I thought it was a very, very effective depiction. And there were certainly moments watching it 20 years later on a 85-inch television where I did see, even through the smog, like, oh, that's a bit of a ropey puppet. But minor flashes. And, as Doctor Who fans, we're not going to judge it because the effects look a little bit ropey 20 years later. But no it's way. Still, like I'm being very, very cynical there. Like, it's still a very effectively shot alien and still very scary.
Agreed, yeah.
Let's talk RTD and politics.
Okay.
I had to almost turn part of my brain off watching this because, as you know, Rob, and as we've discussed with listeners before, I work in politics, I work in government, I've been in briefings with ministers, and I know how things work in certain departments, as I'm sure do others. And I did sort of, for the first 2 or 3 episodes, have moments of, well, that's not how that would work. And why is the permanent secretary in the meeting? The Secretary of State would be in the meeting, that sort of thing. And then I sort of had to remember that this is just a piece of television where for 4.5 episodes, it's kind of irrelevant who these people are. Peter Capaldi, okay, his official position is that he's the permanent secretary at the Department of the Home Office, but he's just there to be official. And the Prime Minister isn't there to be anything particular other than generic Prime Minister. And, the woman there who's played by the same actress who played Harriet Harman, the deputy leader of the Labor Party in a TV movie called Coalition a few years later. So, unfortunately for me, every time she was on screen, I'm like, oh, Harriet Harman's in the cabinet meeting, which was a bit strange. But she wasn't there to be any particular position, just other minister. And Boffin was just security Boffin, and military guy was just generic general. And once I reminded myself that they're just there to be generic characters, not anything specific, I sort of was able to think like an enjoying viewer and get it, until you get to the last part where RTD seems very keen to make it very, very clear to us that the Prime Minister is a prick. And I thought that was actually a bit disappointing. I think it reflects RTD's very undergraduate view of politics, which I've spoken about many times before. I don't think he really understands politics. He certainly gets political terminology wrong all the time and concepts wrong all the time. But he has this very undergraduate view of all politicians are evil. All politicians are bad. And I think that had we not had the Prime Minister become so overt with those last moments of, oh, but I just care about how I can spin this and get out of that, rather than, this was a guy put under extraordinarily pressure and making horrible, ruthless decisions that we can absolutely debate the morality of, don't get me wrong. But having him just turn into almost a caricature, he's a very bad guy, I thought undermined that. Look, maybe he was going for the contrast with the Capaldi character, who in the end is so horrified by what he has to do when it happens to him that he goes and has another scene I want to talk about specifically. Maybe it was there for a contrast, but it almost felt like RTD, having done 4.5 episodes of really clever, subtle, thoughtful political dialogue, going back to, but I've got to make sure they all know they're all bastards, aren't they? And it's like, no, did you have to?
Yeah, it wasn't needed, because I think the audience would be sitting at home not liking the Prime Minister, but not liking him because of the choices he had to make, which were forced on him. He might otherwise be a really nice guy. It didn't need that extra cherry on top, I agree.
No, and look, there probably was some level of comeuppance that had to happen to the Prime Minister, but I didn't quite like the way they did it.
Yeah. Speaking of government meetings, Dave, the meeting where Lois gets in there, and to get in there, she suggests to Frobisher's, or Peter Capaldi's secretary, that they're sort of having a thing, and the older woman gets annoyed and kind of jealous. That tells us a lot, that, Frobisher was shagging her in decades past, and now they've moved on from that. There's this very interesting character thing that's constructed there in a very clever way. But in the meeting, Frobisher never queries why Lois is there. Obviously, because he didn't ask for her to be there. It's all a lie. It's this huge top secret meeting. Wouldn't the first thing out of his lips be, what the hell is this day one girl doing here? I found that a bit strange.
Yeah, that was absolutely one of the points I was referring to before, where I was sitting there going, that just would not happen. You don't just invite yourself into a top secret meeting in the government secret meeting bunker. It just doesn't happen. And if nobody would, this idea that everybody would sit there and just sort of go, oh, who's she? Well, she looks like she's meant to be here. I guess she. That was one of the moments when I did just have to go, it's a television program, Dave. It's not real. But it is a very good point you make, because they're trying to shape Frobisher up as being the everyman and being almost the sort of the closest thing to a conscience in that committee. And to have him also be a very flawed individual who has clearly cheated on his wife and kids in the past on multiple occasions, such that the other official with him, I don't think she's his secretary, I think she's a quite senior civil servant.
Right.
She's like, yes, I know, he shags around. And you go, oh, this lovely man, he's a bit of a cad. Okay. It's that great character stuff that RTD can do with just a sentence. You suddenly go, he's not quite the Mr. Nice Guy we were meant to think he was.
Yeah, there are layers. We never get into the layers, but they're there. Yeah.
They're just there, yeah. No, really well done.
Dave, I also want to bring up, it's interesting how the show invents a vaccine, and they say, send your kids to school. We're going to give your kids a vaccine to stop them from, being affected and all freezing up and talking funny. There's no storyline element around people being very dubious about a vaccine that was invented seemingly overnight. Some people don't want their kids taken, but that's not specifically about the vaccine. And I was just thinking, when we look back on COVID and vaccines there that were invented over many, many, many months, and how resistant people were to those and got upset about those, then you think of what the reaction would be if the government said, oh, tomorrow the kids are going to get an injection that we've just seemingly invented. Can you imagine how people would be now knowing what people are like post-COVID?
Yes, it did feel very innocent, some of that stuff. I guess in part because everybody had witnessed the children doing some really weird shit. They were like, okay, well, it's unquestionable that something has gone wrong. So,
right.
I mean, look, we know now. I mean, people were denying COVID when there was just impossible evidence to deny. I guess they would have denied that too. So who knows? But I was also appreciative when they had the scene of, a government official's going to go out there and he and his family are going to get the jab on television. And I was thinking, well, I remember the Prime Minister of Australia going out there with a member of the community, a woman, and going, we're having injection number 1 and injection number 2 of the COVID vaccine because the Prime Minister is going to show the world or show Australia that this is the right thing to do and it's safe.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, that happened. That actually happened.
It really did, yeah.
And that leads us into the final scene with Frobisher and his family. Now, Rob, I remembered that Frobisher committed suicide. I could remember him walking into the house and having that what have I done moment and committing suicide. I had completely forgotten that he takes his family with him.
Right.
And that was a very powerful moment for me and such a horrific moment because we know as second-time viewers that the 456 are defeated and that none of the kids would have been taken away, including Frobisher's. But because he didn't know that that's how it was going to end up, he has killed his family. It's a horrible scene, and I think it is right up there as a scene I don't know that a drama would do like this unless it was a proper R-rated, really, really serious, bleak drama. I don't think you'd do this on what is still basically primetime family viewing.
Well, that scene and, of course, Jack's grandson, which I'm sure we'll get to in a moment as well. Yeah, because they involve children and such, it's very, it's borderline, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remembered it was a chilling scene. I remembered he actually killed his family as well. Weirdly, it wasn't quite as chilling as I remembered it, maybe because of the shock of seeing it the first time, so many years ago, that, he shuts the door and then bang, 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 pause, bang. That was him.
Yeah.
And I remember being so shocked. So this time around, it wasn't quite as chilling, I think, just because I wasn't shocked. But it still is very powerful. He's just a man who's given up. That's all you can say. He's just given up. It's the end of the world. I'm just going to do this. Wow,
yeah, and that sense of, well, I'm just doing my job. I'm just following orders. And I can just about live with all that until it's my kids going off to a horrid fate, at which point I can no longer live with myself.
Yeah, agreed, yeah.
You mentioned there the solution to this after Ianto has been killed, which I remember was a bit of a shock when I watched it the first time, and I was impressed they didn't bring him back in some way. They do have to solve the problem, and they do need a kid to do it, and that's very effective, very convincing dialogue. And then just a reference for Blake Seven fans, they realise that Jack's grandson weighs 73 kilos. That's a Blake Seven reference for those who didn't get it. And there is that, again, that impossible choice, which at the time I sort of just remembered being kind of horrified about. But I really got the contrast watching it this time, that the government committee meeting could only make the ultimate choice if their kids were excluded. Jack, because he is notionally the good guy, is willing to personally sacrifice for the greater good.
And it's another tough watch. And this is interesting because I was watching this, like I remembered that Frobisher killed his family, but here I was watching it thinking, I'm pretty sure they killed the kid. But I'd also noted an early line on this rewatch where someone was speculating if his grandson was immortal too. And I started thinking, oh, was that the twist? Have I forgotten something? Do they kill him, but then they get to have their cake and eat it too because he resurrects because his related to Jack. But no, he's toast. He fries, as Decca very unglamorously puts it, and that's not a thing. But for a moment, I was thinking maybe I'd misremembered, and there was going to be a twist, because it's one thing to kill kids behind a closed door and you just hear the gunshot. It's another to see this kid sort of shaking, and they've sped up the film, and his head's shaking, and the blood's coming out of his nose and his ears, I think, and it is bloody horrific. It's horrible. It's a tough watch, and I think Barrowman sells it by there are the tears in his eyes. His eyes are red, but he's just staring straight ahead. He's not gonna look away. He's doing this. Damn it! He's just got to keep looking, and I think Barrowman sells that scene.
Are we ready to talk about the characters and the regulars?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's move then on to John Barrowman playing Captain Jack, and it's funny because Barrowman, both the actor and Captain Jack the character, have in the 17 or so years since this become almost caricatures. Barrowman is more than ever a showman who sort of has his I'm here and I'm outrageous and how dare you cancel me, etc., etc. And Captain Jack, when he turns up, is outrageous and knowingly camp and all the rest of that in later shows. But I was watching this going, that's right, John Barrowman actually really can act. And Jack can be a really powerful character. And I think that the first 2 seasons of Torchwood do lurch between the very good actor and very camp character. But here I was going, no, this is why this guy was such a big name at the time. Like, he is a very good performer, and I absolutely bought that character and the moral conflict within him.
Yeah, like I say, he sold that scene at the end, and for the rest of it, he's quite restrained. There's very little outrageous stuff going on in this. It's a really good performance. I love it.
What did you think of Ianto?
Very good. I mean, he's a little different in this to earlier seasons of Torchwood, not just in the respect of having the relationship with Jack, but also he becomes more of a main character. Now that we've lost more of the Torchwood team, he sort of gets elevated a bit, whereas earlier in Torchwood, he was the guy on the door, basically.
Yeah, he was the guy that made the tea and tidied up, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he gets a much better role here as well. It's not good to see him killed off, but it does make for a more tense story, that's for sure.
Yeah, I really like the performance here. I hadn't remembered it as being quite as good a performance for him. I think, unfortunately, the Ianto character was very heavily compromised by the fact that his main episode in season 1 was the absolutely abysmally bad Cyberwoman episode. Yeah. And it was very hard for his character to recover from that. And I think it generally took a long time. He was very good here. You're right. He has moved from, the guy who cleans up and makes the tea to tech boffin, who can hack into things. That's fine. Characters learn new skills. He was good. I liked it. He was human. There were moments though of that sort of we need to throw in a funny line here, guys, because it's a TV show, and that moment when Ianto and Jack confront the 456, and Ianto sort of throws in the ad-lib line, and Jack's like, I didn't want to say that. Well, I wanted to say that. And you go, okay, this is meant to be funny, bickering couple lines, but you just wouldn't do that in front of an alien in this moment. It was just kind of a bit silly. So, he was good.
How about Gwen?
I thought Gwen was a bit of a weak link in this. I didn't quite get what the purpose of Gwen was, other than to be exposition and explain the tech to the other people sort of person. And I think particularly given that Gwen started out as the everybody, audience surrogate at the start of Torchwood and has now ended up as this, battle-hardened Sigourney Weaver and Aliens type character, I didn't really buy it as well. And particularly as she spends a lot of screen time with Reese, who is so real and so grounded and so nicely written as Mr. Ordinary Guy, that when she's standing next to him, you just go, you actually don't feel that real a character to me at all.
No, that's a good point. I found it interesting. We get a sneak peek of her making this video. I think it might be in like the next episode, flash forward, and she's saying, this is how the world ends and all of this. And It's revealed in that last episode she makes that spooky video in front of the kids. She's in the chicken shed with the kids, and she's talking into the camera saying, oh, this is how the world ends and all this. I thought that's quite bizarre behaviour. You might just panic these kids a little bit by doing that. But that's beside the point. That's just a random comment I had jotted down here.
But let me interject and just say I thought that whole monologue was just bizarre. I was thinking, why would you say it like that? Like, the only reason you would ever phrase it like that is because you are in something that RTD has written.
Yeah, but do you mean talking about the Doctor and stuff like that?
And this is how the world ends and all that. I was like, no, this is just RTD dialogue for the sake of RTD dialogue.
Yeah, it was strange. I've mentioned the action hero moment earlier and the dual wielding pistols and such. Oh my god. Yeah, not as into Gwen in this at all. No. So Dave, let's wrap up. In conclusion, how do you feel now?
It is a very, very good piece of television. It almost sits outside of the Doctor Who universe. It actually doesn't feel all that connected to the Doctor Who universe at all. And I think it's probably the better for it. Look, has some of it aged in terms of effects and tech and tone? Absolutely, but that's okay. I watch a lot of television that's aged in all of those senses. I come back to the fact that it was intelligently written, the moral dilemmas and the moral ambiguity were genuine, and for the most part very genuinely played. But more than anything, when I was watching this, I felt tense and nervous.
Yeah.
And wondering what's going to happen. I had bought into the fate of not just the regular characters, but the guest characters, and frankly, the hundreds of thousands of children who were in for a horrible fate. I absolutely was sitting there with butterflies in my stomach going, how do we get out of this? And if a piece of television on a second watch nearly 20 years later can do that, that's extremely well done.
Yeah, agree on all of that. I know I picked a bit at this tonight. That's because that's more interesting to do than being all, gee, it was so nice. Gee, I really liked it. The bottom line is I did really like it. There were a few moments I frowned a little or winced or laughed at it, and thought we could have done without that. But they're few and far between. This just rocketed along. It put characters in genuinely hard situations to deal with, situations where you're thinking, how on earth will they get out of this? The characters don't even always deal with the situations or deal well with the situations, and for that it just feels really solid. I think this is something you could show anyone and they'd get into it. Unlike Doctor Who from this era or Doctor Who from any other era, this is, to me, absolutely peak Torchwood. The next season tries to have lightning strike twice with another sort of global story full of dilemma as well. It just doesn't work as well. This really is the pinnacle of Torchwood for me.
I actually have never seen season 4.
Have you not?
No, like all the other ones, I had to get copies somehow, whether it was by DVD or other means. So there was a delay between its screening and me finally having a copy. And unlike Children of Earth, where in that delay people are going, no, you need to check this out. In the delay between season 4 being broadcast and me having a copy, people were going, don't bother. So I never bothered.
Yeah, I mean, take this story and all the bits we've made fun of and amp those up and just a general vibe on top of it's really not as good as this. And that's where it sort of lands. So if you want to watch it one day, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but gosh, it does some weird shit. I'll say that much.
I am curious. I'm definitely curious.
Maybe one day. Moving on to listener feedback, Frankie Norton, a great supporter of ours on Facebook, has actually emailed us here. Dave, he says, "Hi Rob and Dave. This is my first time emailing in, though I do communicate regularly via Facebook." Oh, I just said that, Frankie. "And I have a few different things to talk about. Rob, I said on Facebook I'd report back about Mandip Gill's new TV series, Cooper and Fry, if you haven't watched it and are interested. And it's not too bad. It's pretty much your typical 2-hour police murder mystery procedural, maybe a bit grittier than some shows like that. It's 4 by 2-hour episodes with a case solved by the end of each episode and both the lead detectives having a backstory and emotional baggage as usual. That you find out more and more over the course of the series. Mandip inhabits the character of DC Diane Fry pretty well, and you definitely aren't sitting there thinking, that's Yaz, that's Yaz, that's Yaz all the time, which I think is the mark of a good actor. I very much enjoyed your open mic monthly ep, although I completely forgot it was an open mic ep until it came out, so I didn't think up any questions to ask. Looking forward to the next List Makers ep, which should be interesting listening to. Lastly, I wanted to put forward 2 ideas for potential future List Makers episodes. How about top 5 classic series directors and top 5 moments within classic Doctor Who stories? I don't think you've done either of these yet, but do please correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I've rambled long enough, so I'll sign off by saying I love the show and thank you very much for the hard yards you guys put into it. Much love from Frankie Norton.
Thank you very much, Frankie. We have an email from Troy Hunter, who is from Melbourne, and I see at Science of Audio events down here.
Oh, really?
Really?
Ah.
Hi, fellas. Long-time listener, first-time suggester for the hat. Here's a few top 5s I would love to hear your thoughts on, especially the first one. Top 5 new Who stories that should be novelised and why. Top 5 classic Who stories that should be animated next. Top 5 companions relatives you would like to have seen more of. And congratulations on the recent anniversary and keep up the good work. Cheers, Troy. Thank you, Troy. They are in the hat.
Excellent. We've got a bunch of comments now on our top deceased convention guests episode of the List Makers. The first is from Andrew Dowling. He says, love all your shows, guys. Haven't listened to this one yet, so before I do, mine would be William Hartnell, Robert Holmes, John Wiles, Jacqueline Hill, and Dennis Spooner. Your main show, List Makers and Alternate Galaxies are required listening at my place. Thank you for keeping me entertained.
That's a very strong list, Andrew. Thank you for getting in touch.
And got some snaps, which he would have heard by now.
He absolutely would have. We have one from Alex Spencer on the same topic. Assuming it's about classic Who, Patrick, the very best classic Doctor for me. Jacqueline, amazing first companion. Maureen as Vicky, huge respect, both actress and companion. Annika as Polly, such a strong sign of the times in a non-ditzy way. Wendy as Zoe, nice suggestion, Alex, but I don't think Wendy Padbury's dead yet. But that's okay.
No one's told her.
No, but he goes on to say, kicked myself, I missed her in Australia last time. She was here, finally a super smart 60s companion. Yes, she was here because she wasn't dead. That's quite funny, Alex, thank you. And lastly, Liz as Sarah Jane. Wasn't huge on her character as a child, but such an amazing actress who died too young. Would have loved to meet her. Sorry, that's 6. Well, we'll take out Wendy, who's still alive, and indeed Annika Wills, who's still alive. And you've got room for one extra one there, Alex. So,
yeah, we skipped over Annika as well, yeah.
Yes, no, thank you very much.
Okay, on our State of Decay episode, Brett Hosking via Facebook says, one of my favourites. I read the Target novel before I have any memory of seeing it, though I almost certainly had. Love the Terrance Dicks story that J&T asked him to expand on the part where the Doctor and Romana explain the evolution of their names. Why? It's bloody boring.
Thank you, Brett. Rob Kelly on Facebook says, you're decaying my productivity, laugh emoji. But as always, love listening to the pod. Thank you, Rob.
Jeremy Power via YouTube says, thanks for the deep dive, guys. State of Decay is one of my all-time favourites for sentimental reasons. I vividly remember having lunch at my grandma's house on a Saturday and then watching it with my cousins on TV, an omnibus run around 1988. That would have been the one we were discussing on the episode, Dave.
It would have been, yes.
I would have been about 8 years old, and it was just so awesome. Also, I always found it funny when the Doctor gives that speech. He says something along the lines of, no weapons, no training, odds insurmountable, but we will rise in the name of E-Space. I always laugh because the villagers would have had no clue they were in E-Space. For them, they're just in a medieval village. I'm not sure if Terrance Dicks intended that or if the Doctor was just being cheeky, but either way, as a viewer, that's always a funny part of the story. Appreciate all the hard work you guys do on the podcast, always a fan, and always look forward to it. Cheers.
No, it is a very funny scene, Jeremy, where the Doctor starts doing the whole St. Crispin Day speech from Henry V, and the villagers have no idea that he's cribbing Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Rod Pales via Facebook says, what a gift of nostalgia this story is for me. Everything comes together very well. The location filming in Black Park looks good. If you are in the UK and go for a walk around it, it still has the same vibe. I was interested that the designer was inspired by Monts and Michael for the tower. When you compare them, you can see it immediately. Tom and Lala are at ease and have lovely subtle interaction, so professional given their personal situation. Tom delivers the full range of his acting chops throughout. Matthew is okay for his age. The royal duo are very good, but at times enjoy putting the hammy into hammer, as does Orcon. Overall, a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon revisiting the 80s, followed by the podcast. Feels like a comfortable book club. Thank you both.
Very nice. On our Ask Us Anything episode from January, John Isles via Facebook says, caught up with the Ask Us Anything episode. Once again, an enjoyable chat between two friends. I feel like I know you both a little better now. I'm regretting not sending in a question. I did think of one as I was listening. If either of you has visited the UK, did Doctor Who or other TV and films create an unrealistic view of what it was like there?
If I'd only watched Doctor Who, I think probably, but I can certainly say we consumed so much British television when we were kids. And indeed, my dad was born and grew up for the first 13 years of his life in the UK. I kind of had a broader context, so no.
I would have watched a lot of contemporary type UK stuff, whether it was The Bill or Grange Hill or whatever, before I went there the first time in 91. It meant I recognised brands and I recognised the look of things. And I don't think it was an unrealistic view. I was quite amazed. I felt like it was like the first time I went to New York and all the films and TV set in New York. I stood in New York and thought, I'm in TV, I'm in film. This is amazing. And when I was in the UK, it was sort of the same. It's like, oh, I'm in the same sort of locale as where Grange Hill happens and these other shows I watch happen. It wasn't that unrealistic, no.
Yeah, it's funny, like you go to London and you know that if you need a chemist, Boots is a chemist. There's no reason to know that other than TV. Or I remember being, having a cold when I was in Canada and looking on the shelves and seeing Tylenol and going, we don't have that in Australia, but I've seen enough TV to know that's their version of Panadol. I'm getting Tylenol,
Yes.
It is funny how these things seep in.
Yeah, it's great.
On our top master stories, Jonathan Riddle via YouTube says, 2 snaps. 5, Frontier in Space. 4, The Sea Devils. 3, The Keeper of Traken. 2, The Mind of Evil. And 1, World Enough in Time, The Doctor Falls.
Very nice picks. And Jonathan returns to comment on our top nostalgic stories episode of the List Makers. He says, and this is a longer comment here, in the United States, my local public broadcasting channel ran episodes from the Tom Baker 70s era. While my memories of these are dim, I think I saw bits from both the Pyramids of Mars and the Hand of Fear. I was introduced to Doctor Who in 2004 by a college roommate. We would play MP4 videos of the classic series while doing our homework together. When the 2005 New Who series launched, I was primed for the show and already knew the basic concepts. I was still blown away at what RTD and company did with the relaunch. Among my friends in the university, New Who was must-watch television. Blink was an episode we talked about for weeks afterwards, and I remember The Stolen Earth taking my breath away. By the time Matt Smith arrived, I had graduated and lost track of the Doctor. I only recently came back due to DVD collections of the RTD and Moffat series. I now have a massive DVD library of old and new episodes, and I listen to British and Australian podcasts about the show on YouTube.
That's very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, great backstory, Jonathan.
Rob, I mentioned earlier in the show that we always have plenty of non-Doctor Who things to talk about in What Have We Been Watching, and I'm looking at our show notes and going, you've been watching a bit, Rob.
I've got a stupid amount to get through, Dave. I will be as quick as I can. In this past month, my wife and I knocked through X-Files Season 11 from 2018, which we'd never actually watched after Season 10 was a bit of a misfire. We really liked it. We also blasted through Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which is a one-season Aaron Sorkin thing, which is set around a show akin to Saturday Night Live, and we really, really love that. We watched it all in about 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, that's a Sorkin show that I haven't seen, and after you were telling me about it, I do need to go and find that sometime, yes.
Yeah, it's worth it. We watched Blood and Chrome, which is a Battlestar Galactica spin-off, which went out as webisodes. Who remembers webisodes, guys? But this is the webisodes stitched together with some extra footage to create a movie. Basically, basically it's Commander Adama as a young man. He's a rookie pilot in the first Cylon War. And it's got the look of a fan film. And that's my throwback to talking about fan films earlier in Short Topics. I haven't been watching fan films, but I watched something that looked like a fan film, because it's got a tiny budget and all of that. And finally, some books. Matthew Perry's Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, which is just harrowing in places and also very sad, because he clearly knew he was messed up and he absolutely doesn't want to die, as he makes very clear in the text so many times, but he was dead a year later after making this. Obviously, I listened to this because of watching Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which he stars in. I also have listened to What Have I Done, which is Ben Elton's autobiography, and I thought that was really well done. Berserker, which is Adrian Edmondson's autobiography. It's less well done than Ben Elton's, but both of them gave me new insights into Rick Mayall, and not always good insights, but I appreciate having those now. And finally, in anticipation of the new Buffy series, which we've learned in the last day or two isn't actually happening now, I've read some Buffy novels. So I've been quite busy, Dave.
I haven't got nearly as much, but a couple of things I do want to mention and talk briefly about. I have finished season 1 of Starfleet Academy. I will say, as a starting point, whoever did the trailers and the pre-publicity for this did that show a massive disservice, because I think they completely undersold what it was, and I was not going to watch it because of that. But a few other fans whose views I trust, and the guys over at Trek This Out, a podcast that was reviewing it that I've listened to all the way through the season 1, their hot takes, and they've been really good. They all said, actually, no, the People Obviously is not what it's about. It is much more mainstream Trek than that. Look, I mostly enjoyed it. There were a couple of really bad episodes that I think leaned a lot more into the we're going to be hip and modern for the kids, and were kind of cringy. But there were others that were really nice, good character moments. And by the end of it, the cadets I sort of really liked as a bunch of characters. I thought they were really good. All the adults, the staff, I thought were for the most part terrible, annoying, not convincing. But look, I liked more than I disliked. I'm not blown away by it, but it was. I'm glad I watched it, given I wasn't going to. Something I've been meaning to watch for a long time, Rob, is the remake, the reboot, the new series, whatever you want to call it, of All Creatures Great and Small. I've now watched seasons 1 and 2. Look, All Creatures Great and Small, the original, was genuine family viewing in our house growing up. It was usually shown here in an evening on a weekend, usually over winter, and I can remember sitting around after a roast dinner as a family in winter, and if Grandma was there or the aunt was there, they would watch it too, and watching All Creatures. And I thought this reboot was really lovingly done. It was very entertaining. I think they have taken characters like Tristan, and as fantastic as Peter Davison's performance as Tristan in the original was, they've turned Tristan from the guy who rocks up and gets a few gags every episode and fills in when Christopher Timothy's injured to actually being a proper character. I've always been a fan of Samuel West, Timothy West's son, and it's great to see him as Siegfried, and they bring, they actually make Helen a real character. They make the housekeeper a real character, which is really nice to see. I've stopped after 2 seasons because I started season 3, and as much as I was enjoying it, there was a sort of bit like, I've seen this episode already. There's only so many times you can go out and cure a sick cow with an offbeat Yorkshire farmer before you go, I've kind of seen this. I'm having a break, and then I will come back. Because I am genuinely keen to see how they do the war years, which they skipped over in the original.
Well, season 3 has that World War I flashback episode, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's season 3, and I think you'll just eat that up. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I'm very keen, but I just am taking a break because it's binging it showed the similarity between the episodes a little bit too much, so I'm cleansing the palate a bit. And as I flagged, I did watch the new TV series of Lord of the Flies. That was excellent. It's 4 one-hour episodes. It's by the guy who was the showrunner and writer of Adolescence, which won a lot of awards recently for its writing and indeed its acting. And I thought that taking 4 hours to tell the story of Lord of the Flies was really, really good, because it took time to really get down into the psyches of the different kids, into the characters of the different kids, see the devolution and the way that things pan out. There was some stuff from the book that I remembered and was sort of ready for. There were 1 or 2 moments I'd forgotten from the book, and I was like, Wow! Oh my God! I've done that. Oh wow! Oh yeah, that was in the book. I forgot. It was very, very well done. So yeah, very enjoyable series there.
Great. There is some great TV being made, maybe some not so great TV being made, and more to come this year. I know we're both looking forward to The Boys, for example.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. But we're heading overtime, Dave, so let's briefly touch on what we're going to look at next time.
Yes, we agreed sometime, Rob, we were going to move our book-based episodes from 12 monthly to 6 monthly. So we are due next month to do a book. We are due to go back to the Virgin New Adventures. And I think because we enjoyed State of Decay so much, and because we're big Terrance Dicks fans, we have decided to read Terrance Dicks's Blood Harvest.
Looking forward to it very much, yeah.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. As always, we will drop a couple of days earlier a brief plot summary. So if you don't feel like reading or rereading the book to remind yourselves of the plot, we'll do that for you. But you're very welcome to in the meantime.
Alrighty.
And just worth mentioning, we have started our Gin and TARDISes for the year, and one of my intermittent plugs for Spacefall, a Blake 7 podcast. At the time that we release this episode, we will be about to release our episode on Rumours of Death, which, spoilers, is my favourite episode of Blake 7. Last week we recorded our episode on Terminal, the Season 3 finale, so we are working our way through that. Please give it a listen if you like Blake 7, or indeed if you're curious about Blake 7.
Lots to listen to, but until then, I've been Rob.
And I've been Dave.
Very nice. And this has been the Doctor Who Show. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. You've been listening to
The Doctor Who Show with Rob and Dave.
Find us online by searching for
The Doctor Who Show.
We also love it when you write in. Drop us a line anytime at hello@thedwshow.net.